consent that the call of quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, the distinguished senator, senior senator from Connecticut, Senator Lieberman, had a speech thanking postal staff. I'd ask consent that his speech be placed in the record at the time of the passage of the postal bill.
Without objection.
And I ask, excuse me, I'm out of breath here. I ask unanimous consent that following the adoption of the motion to proceed S. 1925, the Senate be in a period debate only on the bill for the remainder of today's session, and the Senate resumes consideration of the bill on Thursday, April 26th. It'd be for debate only until 11:30 a.m.
Without objection.
Mr. President,
under the previous order, the Senate adopts the motion to proceed to S. 1925, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 312, S. 1925, a bill to reauthorize the Violence Against Women Act of 1994.
Mr. President, Mr. President.
The senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, I'm pleased that we're able to move directly to the legislation without a cloture vote. The Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act is a bipartisan bill. It has 61 co-sponsors. I know I was encouraged to hear the majority leader and the Republican leader yesterday morning discussing moving forward quickly to pass this legislation. I agree with the majority leader. I do not want to see the bill weaken. And I agree with the Republican leader that there is strong bipartisan support for the Leahy-Claypool bill. So I look forward to their working on an agreement. I've spoken to both of them, told them I will support an agreement that will allow us to consider and expeditiously approve the bill in short order. And of course, I'll be happy to help in any way I can to facilitate that. You know, the bipartisan Violence Against Women Act has been the centerpiece of the federal government's commitment to combat domestic violence and dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. The impact of the landmark law has been remarkable. It is one law you can point to and say this has provided life-saving assistance to hundreds of thousands of women, children, and men. And at a time when we can sometimes be polarized around here, I appreciate the bipartisan support of this bill. Senator Claypool and I introduced the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act last year. Now, we come from different parts of the country. We come from different parties. I think it's safe to say we come from different political philosophies. But we agreed we all have to work to stop violence against women. And in fact, we didn't move forward at all until it had a lot of discussions with both the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee and Republicans on there, trying to accommodate all the points of view. We even continued the outreach after introduction of the bill. I did it through the hearings and the committee process. And the amendment the Judiciary Committee, which I chair, adopted on February 2nd included several additional changes requested by Republican senators. I made sure they were in there. They're outlined in the committee report. We eliminated several provisions that would have offered significant assistance to immigrant victims of domestic and sexual violence. It was difficult to remove these, but we had sought a compromise, and I was encouraged in our committee meetings when Senator Grassley acknowledged our efforts to reach agreement where we could. I said then, I now say, we're willing to go as far as we can to accommodate senators on either side of the aisle. But as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, I cannot abandon the core principle of fairness, and I will not. I will not. So I continue to urge all senators to join together to protect the most vulnerable victims of violence, including battered immigrant women assisting law enforcement, Native American women who suffer in record numbers, and those who traditionally had trouble accessing services. Mr. President, I've said so many times on this floor, a victim is a victim is a victim, and they need to be helped. They deserve our attention. They deserve the protection and access to services our bill provides. We have 61 co-sponsors, including 8 Republicans, 16 of the 17 women in the Senate. Both parties have joined as co-sponsors. They've been strong supporters from the start, and the bill is better because of their efforts. You know, there's one purpose and one purpose alone for the bill that Senator Crapo and I introduced, and that is to help and protect victims of domestic and sexual violence. And that purpose is reinforced when we turn to this bill during Crime Victims Week and Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And our bill, Mr. President, I should tell you, is based on months of work with survivors and advocates and law enforcement officers from all across the country, and I must say, from all political persuasions, from the right to the left. It's a bipartisan bill that is developed in an open and democratic process. But mostly it is responsive to the unmet needs of victims. The New York Times had a column by Dorothy Samuels last Sunday. They got it right. She wrote, "The provisions respond to real humanitarian and law enforcement needs." You know, when Senator Crapo and I worked to put this legislation together, we purposely avoided proposals that were extreme or divisive on either the right or the left. We selected only those proposals that law enforcement and survivors and the professionals who work with crime victims every day told us were essential. We did not go for somebody who didn't have first-hand experience. We asked the people who actually have to make the law work. And that's why every one of these provisions has such widespread support nationally. In fact, our reauthorization bill is supported by more than 1,000 federal, state, and local organizations, service providers, law enforcement, religious organizations, and many, many more. Now, we've done a good job on the domestic violence front, so sexual assault is where we need to increase our focus. That's what the bill does. The administration is fully aboard, and I welcome their statement of support. We have to pass this legislation. We have to pass these provisions against sexual assault. And I think of the advocates in my own state of Vermont who work not only in the cities, but especially in the rural areas. Mr. President, it's not just those of us from small states. Every single state has rural areas. The distinguished presiding officer does. The distinguished majority leader. Distinguished Republican leader. We all have rural areas. I think of Karen Tronsgard Scott of the Vermont Network to End Domestic and Sexual Violence. Jane Van Buren with Women Helping Battered Women. They have helped us put this together. I appreciate the guidance from all across the nation, from such organizations as the National Network to End Domestic Violence, the National Alliance to End Sexual Violence, particularly the National Task Force to End Sexual and Domestic Violence Against Women. Coalition has been maintained, has been invaluable in these efforts. It is working within that we're able to adjust the allocation of funds to increase needed funding for sexual assault efforts and do it without harming the other coordinated efforts. We reached our understanding working with them, not by picking a number out of a hat or trying to outbid some other proposal. It wasn't that. Everybody worked together. We don't know we only have so many dollars. We tried to do it and use the money where it works the best. The provision ensuring services will be available to all victims, regardless of sexual orientation and gender identity, is supported by the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights and numerous civil rights and crime victims advocates. I was pleased to see a letter from Cindy Dyer. She was President Bush's director in the Office of Violence Against Women, in which she writes, "As criminal justice professionals, our job is to protect the community. But we're not able to do that unless all the tools necessary are available to all victims of crime." Of course she's right. Victim is a victim is a victim. Mr. President, when I was a state's attorney, I went to crime scenes at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's a battered and bloody victim. We hoped alive, sometimes not. The police never said, is this victim a Democrat or a Republican? Is this victim gay or straight? Is this victim an immigrant, or is this victim native-born? They said, this is a victim. How do we find the person who did this? How do we stop them from doing it again? A victim is a victim is a victim. Everybody in law enforcement will tell you that. The provision, because of that, we added a limited number of new U visas for immigrant victims of serious crimes to help law enforcement. It's backed not only by the immigrant rights organizations, as one might expect, but it's backed by the Fraternal Order Police, a right that the expansion of the U visa program will provide incalculable benefits to our citizens and our communities at a negligible cost. But my friends in law enforcement are right, as they so often are. On Tuesday, an editorial in the local paper, the Washington Post, urged passage of our bipartisan bill, noting a comprehensive committee report convincingly details gaps in current programs as identified by law enforcement officers, victim service providers, judges, healthcare professionals. No one, gay or straight, man or woman, legal or undocumented, should be denied protections against domestic abuse or sexual violence. Mr. President, I agree with that editorial, because what it says is what we've said over and over on this floor. A victim is a victim is a victim. If you're a victim, you should have somebody ready to help. There are improvements that are not only reasonable but necessary if we're going to fulfill our commitment to victims of domestic sexual violence. If we say if you're a victim of domestic or sexual violence, we won't pick and choose and say this victim can be helped, this one's going to be left on their own. We say we're going to help all of them. A victim is a victim is a victim. And I believe that senators of both parties take an honest look at all the provisions in our bipartisan VAWA reauthorization bill. They'll find them to be common sense measures that we can all support. This isn't a Democratic or Republican measure. This is a good government measure. But this protects people in our society who sadly need protection. 61 senators have already reached this conclusion from both parties. So I hope more will join us. I hope the Senate will promptly pass the Leahy-Crapo Violence Against Women Authorization Act. And I ask consent that my full statement be made part of the record.
Without objection.
And, Mr. President, I was going to suggest the absence of quorum, but I see the distinguished senator from Texas on the floor, and I will yield the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I rise to talk about the Violence Against Women Act, and Senator Leahy, the distinguished chairman of the Judiciary Committee, has a bill that has many good parts. And I was listening to the things that he said about it, and I agree with many of them. Because there are some areas of disagreement, I have worked with many of my colleagues to have a substitute that has the same coverage but is better in other ways also. And I think we should have the ability to look at both. And from that, I would hope that we would be able to pass a bill out of the Senate to address the violence against women that is in our country. And our bill, like Senator Leahy's bill, actually covers men who we know now are also subject to this kind of violence. And our bill covers men who have the same victimization as the women have had and for which we covered 16 years ago. Mr. President, I just want to say that I have been championing this issue for a very long time. When I was in the Texas legislature, I learned that there were serious problems with the reporting and prosecution of rape in our country. And the state statute in Texas in the early 70s discouraged reporting because of embarrassment to the victim and the difficulty of obtaining convictions because victims were not willing to come forward and report rapes because they felt like they were treated like a criminal sometimes. And if they actually did report it and they agreed to help the prosecution, their treatment on the witness stand was so humiliating that they gave up. And so the reports were not made. This was true in Texas, but, Mr. President, it was true throughout our country. So I worked with Democratic members of the legislature and led the effort to strengthen victim protections in this area. And it included limiting irrelevant questions asked by law enforcement officials and attorneys and redefining the meaning of consent, all of which enhanced the privacy rights of our victims, and we created a statute of limitations that was more in line with other crimes of assault and battery. Our bill was so good, Mr. President, that when it passed in 1975, it became a model for other states who were passing legislation, and this was the beginning of the effort to do just that. It was the model bill that many states looked at and adapted and adopted in their states to protect the victims of violent crimes in our country. In the Senate, it was my bill that created the Amber Alert system that would go across state lines. I worked with Senator Feinstein on that bill, and our bill has saved 550 abducted children. It has been documented. So we have been able to do some things on a bipartisan basis. I've strongly supported the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Stalking across state lines was also my bill. So I have been in this effort for a long time. Of course, 16 years ago, when the Violence Against Women Act first passed, it was unanimous on a voice vote. Everyone supported it. We have now to renew yet again this bill, and I hope that we are going to come together tomorrow to pass it. I am going to support Senator Leahy's bill. I like many parts of it, but I also think we can improve it, and the areas that I am going to put in my substitute, and I hope that we will be able to pass that as well. Our bill keeps many of the committee-reported bill intact. For instance, Senator Klobuchar, I am co-sponsoring her bill to take the anti-stalking bill that I passed originally into cyber-stalking, because that wasn't a problem when we first passed the Violence Against Women Act, but it is a problem today. Our current legislation, the current legislation that I'm going to introduce, will update and strengthen current law and fix some weaknesses that I think are in Senator Leahy's bill. Our bill updates current law by mandating tougher sentences for violent crimes, increasing support for sexual assault investigations and rape kit testing, requiring more effective Justice Department oversight of grant programs to ensure scarce funds aren't wasted. This was as a result of the IG in the Justice Department who said there was not enough oversight and not enough auditing of the grants to assure that it goes to the victims and the victims' rights organizations for which it is intended. Our bill certainly is one that I hope we will be able to pass. You know, one of the trends that is not good in this country right now is the downward curve of sentences handed down in federal court in child pornography. The most recent report to Congress of the U.S. Sentencing Commission notes that child pornography defendants are being sentenced to terms below federal sentencing guidelines in 45% of cases. Almost half of these defendants are receiving less than the recommended sentences. In one particularly egregious instance, a man was convicted of knowingly possessing hundreds of child pornography pictures and videos of 8 to 10-year-old girls being abused. I can hardly even talk about that. But even worse, Mr. President, the sentencing guidelines called for him to receive 63 to 78 months of imprisonment. He was sentenced to 1 day in prison. Mr. President, that is ridiculous. It is obscene itself. Our bill would impose a mandatory minimum sentence of 1 year in these cases. You know, if I could have written this bill by myself, it would have been more. Minimum 1 year for child pornography showing 8 to 10-year-old girls being violated. It's hard to talk about, and we need to do something about it. And our substitute does create a minimum sentence for this type of violation. So we have many other points of our bill that are very strong. My substitute is one that I think we can put with Senator Leahy's bill. When we go to conference, I know the House is going to pass a bill. They are introducing their own. We will go to conference on this bill, and we will come out with a good bill if everyone will cooperate, because we are on the same path. And I think our bill is a good and solid one. I am looking forward to talking about it tomorrow, having a vote, and I hope that we will be able to go forward with the sincerity that I think everyone has on this issue. And I think Senator Cornyn has a wonderful amendment that will also increase the getting rid of the backlog and the rape testing kits so that people who are guilty of these crimes can be found through the testing and stopped from committing crimes on future victims. That's the purpose. So Senator Cornyn and I hope to be able to have our amendments forward tomorrow, and 2 amendments and Senator Leahy's bill, and we can pass this to the House. And something is going to pass the Senate, and I hope that we will just have a minimum of the ability to move on our very respectable alternatives or amendments, and then let us go to a conference where we can come out with a bill that extends this very important act in our country. Thank you, Mr. President. Oh, and Mr. President, I would ask unanimous consent that 3 letters of support for parts of our bill be submitted for the record from rape prevention and victim protection groups. The PROTECT is saying their support for strengthening federal sentencing of child sexual exploitation. The Shared Hope International is very supportive of the parts of our bill that have gotten into the international realm of sex trafficking. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, which is the largest rape victim organization in America, has written a very strong letter, and the Criminal Justice Legal Foundation. And I would like for those letters to be submitted for the record, and hopefully we'll be able to talk again tomorrow about these pieces of legislation.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor and suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. President, I would ask that the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I rise today, along with my colleague, the presiding officer, to pay tribute to Lance Corporal Abraham Taro, a Rhode Islander who served in the United States Marine Corps. On April 12th, Lance Corporal Taro was killed while conducting combat operations in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. A memorial service will be held on Saturday in Rhode Island to honor his selfless sacrifice, and he will then be laid to rest in his native home of Liberia. When he was about 7 years old, Lance Corporal Taro left Liberia and started a new life in the United States. He was one among thousands of Liberians who came to the United States seeking safety from a civil war. We are proud that so many of these brave individuals and their families now call Rhode Island their home, and our state continues to be enriched by this strong community. Lance Corporal Taro enlisted in the United States Marine Corps in June 2009. He was on his second deployment to Afghanistan, assigned to the 2nd Battalion, 9th Marine Regiment, 2nd Marine Division of the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, where he was serving as a mortarman and had additional duties as a military dog handler. Each generation of Americans is called upon to protect and sustain our democracy. And among our greatest heroes are the men and women who have worn the uniform of our nation and have sacrificed for our country to keep it safe and to keep it free. It is our duty to protect the freedom they sacrificed their lives for through our service, our citizenship. We must continue to keep their memories alive and honor their heroism, not simply by words but by deeds, as citizens of this great country. Today, our thoughts are with Lance Corporal Taro's loving family in Liberia, Falmata and Abraham Carr, his brother Randall, his wife Jua, and his son Avant, and all his family, friends, and his comrades in arms. We join them in commemorating his sacrifice and honoring his example of selfless service and love and courage and devotion to the Marines with whom he served and the people of Afghanistan he was trying to help. Lance Corporal Taro is among many Rhode Islanders who have proven their loyalty, their integrity, and their personal courage by giving the last full measure of their lives in service to our country in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and elsewhere around the globe. Today we honor his memory and the memory of all those who have served and sacrificed as he did. He has joined a distinguished roll of honor, including many Rhode Islanders who have sacrificed and served since September 11, 2001. All of these men and women who have given their lives in the last decade in Afghanistan and Iraq have done great service to the nation. It is a role of honor. It is a role that Lance Corporal Taro joins. It should be for us a role not just to recognize and remember, but to recommit to trying in some small way to match their great sacrifice for this great nation. And in Lance Corporal Taro's situation, it also should remind us that this young man born in Liberia, who came as a child to Rhode Island, demonstrates to us all that being an American is about what is in your heart, not necessarily where you were born or what language you may have spoken as a child. It's about believing in America, believing so much that you would give your life to defend the values that we so much cherish. Mr. President, I also rise today, again along with the presiding officer, my colleague, Senator Whitehouse, to pay my respect and honor the life of Sergeant Maxwell R. Dorley, a distinguished and beloved member of the Providence Police Department, who passed away tragically in the line of duty. Sergeant Dorley's personal story, which began in Liberia, again, another example of the extraordinary contribution of the Liberian community to the state of Rhode Island, along with the recently deceased United States Marine Lance Corporal Taro. Sergeant Dorley's story is another example of inspiration and hope for all of us. At the young age of 7, Sergeant Dorley followed his aunt, Hawa Vincent, to Providence, beginning his own chapter of the American dream, and he wrote a remarkable chapter in that great story of America. Sergeant Dorley attended Mount Pleasant High School and not only graduated at the top of his class, earning admission to Brown University, but he also befriended Koo, who would become his wife and partner for 27 years. His love and devotion to his family was so deep and genuine that when their first child, Amanda, was on her way, Sergeant Dorley declined admission to Brown University and began working 4 jobs so that he could support his new family. At this early stage in his life, Sergeant Dorley chose to prioritize his new family over himself. And as he did so many times throughout his life, Sergeant Dorley thought about others before he thought of himself. His example of hard work, 4 jobs to support the family, is the story of America. Coming here from someplace else, working as hard as you can to build a strong family and contribute to a strong community. From helping his family pay off the notes on their cars to gathering old and used police uniforms for his fellow police officers in Liberia, Sergeant Dorley exemplified the best of what we expect from our public servants, a deep commitment to serving others for the greater good. While terribly tragic, Sergeant Dorley passed away last Thursday doing what he knew best, helping others by trying to come to the aid of his fellow Providence police officers, Officers Edward Kimball and Tony Hampton, who are trying to break the fight. Today, we offer our deepest condolences, and our thoughts are with all of Sergeant Dorley's family, friends, and colleagues, but especially with his mother, Miata, who is traveling from Liberia, his wife, Koo, his daughter, Amanda, his son, Robert, and all of his beloved family. We join them in celebrating Sergeant Dorley's many contributions. Despite his short time with us, he gave us much, and we honor his memory and his service to the people of Providence as a Providence police officer. The loss of Sergeant Dorley is also a reminder of the great sacrifice and incredible courage of all of our police officers who voluntarily put themselves in harm's way to preserve the peace and stability that allows us to enjoy our own lives. Today, we especially salute the service and sacrifice of Sergeant Dorley, and we honor the legacy he leaves of serving others and prioritizing the greater good over his own personal interests. We have indeed lost a remarkable individual and a great example of selfless service. Again, we offer our deepest condolences to his family, and with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor. The Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, I am honored to follow my senior senator, Jack Reed, who has been kind enough to preside now for me so that we may deliver these remarks together. The state of Rhode Island has lost 2 men in recent days, 2 men who came from far away to our state to dedicate themselves to its service and to the service of our country. One serving our country with honor and distinction in Afghanistan, and the other serving our ocean state's great capital city of Providence. United States Marine Corps Lance Corporal Abraham Tarwo of Providence was a mortarman with Weapons Company, 2nd Battalion, 9th Marine Regiment of the 2nd Marine Division out of Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. He deployed with the 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force Forward, where he served as a dog handler in addition to his duties as a mortarman. Abraham was born in Liberia during a time of civil war. His mother and father sent him to America when he was only 7 years old to find a better life. He joined our Liberian community in Rhode Island, which is an important and valued part of our Rhode Island civic life. Abraham grew of age and joined the Marines in June of 2009 and was promoted to Lance Corporal in August of 2010. In December, he deployed for a second tour of duty to Afghanistan. He had earned the Combat Action Ribbon, the Sea Service Deployment Ribbon, the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, the National Defense Service Medal, and the NATO Medal. He died Thursday, April 12th, from wounds sustained from an improvised explosive device during a dismounted patrol in support of combat operations in the Marja district of Helmand Province. He was 25 years old. His commanding officer, Captain Charles E. Anclam III, said Abraham had an understanding of suffering and sacrifice from his childhood and family ties to Liberia. He also knew about disproportionate service, Captain Anclam said. He held no birth obligation to America. In fact, his citizenship was still being processed when he gave his life for his newly adopted country and his brothers in arms. Abraham leaves behind his wife, Jua, Kelly, and their 18-month-old baby boy, Avant Carr, who Abraham would talk to by webcam almost every night. Our prayers for comfort and solace go out to them and to Abraham's mother, Famata Carr, his brother, Randall Carr, and to his network of extended family and friends in Rhode Island, in the United States, and in Liberia. A memorial service will be held by Abraham's family and friends in Rhode Island this weekend, and then Abraham will be transported to Liberia, where a funeral will be held and he will be laid to rest. On Monday, in Afghanistan, the Marines and sailors of Weapons Company gathered around a makeshift battlefield cross for their own memorial service in Abraham's honor. As Abraham's comrades stepped forward one by one to pay their silent respects, Yeager, the black lab who had been Abraham's partner since July 2011, walked to the front and lay down before his handler's cross. The Marine's prayer says, in part, "Protect my family, give me the will to do the work of a Marine." Abraham's wife, Jua, said that the Marine Corps was Abraham's other love, his second family. Abraham died doing the work of a Marine. And we pray in Abraham's memory for the protection of his brothers and sisters so bravely serving our country in the Marine Corps, and for his beloved family here at home. Like Lance Corporal Tarwo, Providence Police Sergeant Maxwell Dorley was also born in Liberia and also came to America as a child. He and his mother settled in Providence, and Max attended Mount Pleasant High School, where he met his high school sweetheart and future wife, Koo. Max worked 4 jobs to support their young family and eventually became a Providence police officer, where he would serve the people of Rhode Island's capital city for 15 years. Max practiced community policing in the truest sense. He went by his first name when he was on patrol. His life experiences growing up in Providence public housing allowed him to relate to the kids in the neighborhoods on his beat. Max was dedicated to the Providence Police Department and to the men and women of the force. When a call for backup came across the radio this past Thursday morning from two officers trying to break up a fight on River Avenue, Max leapt into his cruiser. As he rushed to the aid of his fellow officers, lights and sirens blaring, he swerved to avoid a collision with a car that crossed his path. He lost control and struck a utility pole. He was rushed to Rhode Island Hospital, but his injuries were too great. Maxwell Dorley died at age 41. He stands now with a list of other Providence police officers who have recently given their lives: Stephen Shaw, Cornell Young, and Jimmy Allen. Max Dorley is remembered as a devoted husband and loving father, always seeking the best for his children, Amanda and Robert, and encouraging them to follow their dreams. Life has no limits, he would tell them, a proposition he had proved in his own life. Today, on behalf of the people of Rhode Island and the U.S. Senate, I join my senior colleague, Senator Reid, to send my wholehearted condolences to Koo, Amanda, and Robert, to Max's mother, Miata Dorley, and to the brave men and women of the Providence Police Force who have lost another colleague and friend. Max gave his life protecting the citizens of our community, and for that we owe him a gratitude that we cannot repay. We mourn the loss of two good men with similar beginnings and a common calling to serve and protect others. Abraham and Max helped make our neighborhoods, our country, and our world a better and safer place to live. They gave their lives, making a real difference in the lives of so many others. We honor them today in the United States Senate. Mr. President, I yield the floor. I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that on Thursday, April 26, 2012, at 11:30 a.m., the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations: calendar number 509-510, 509-510. That there be 30 minutes for debate equally divided in the usual form, that upon the use or yielding back of time, the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on the nominations in the order listed. The motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order, that any related statements be printed in the record, that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection, it is so ordered.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the Senate proceed to prepare